That was crap. Happy New Year, folks. Welcome to a special New Year's live reading. Got my shiny unicorn horn on, but I'm going to have to take it off because it's incredibly annoying. Thanks for tuning in on Universal Hangover Day. Yes, and I hope everybody has a better New Year than last year, because Anyway, onwards and upwards. So tonight, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be reading my story, Body Electric, from the Black Hare Press anthology, Banned. Now, if you tuned in a while ago, I hosted a live launch event for that book, because there's two parts to it, you see, and I read the part in this. Basically, it has a companion book, which is a Drabble prequel anthology. Now, some people on Amazon erroneously think that this is excerpts. It isn't. It's not excerpts. It's a standalone Drabble, which, to the uninitiated, is a story told in exactly 100 words. And it acts as a prequel to the story in this. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to read both. I'll start off with the prequel and then go straight into it, just so you can see how they work, because like I say, there's been a couple of negative reviews, and it's people who haven't actually got it. They haven't actually got the concept. Anyway, right, throughout the evening, I will show you multiple ways of getting hold of these anthologies. Right now on the ticker, that's Black Hare Press, blackharepress.com. That's how you get in touch. And basically all these books, including a bunch of stuff that I'm in, are available there. Now, I'll just change that for the anthology Banned. So there you go. If you want to get hold of a copy of Banned, it's getbook.at/banned. I will put all these back on for longer later, but I find them really distracting when I'm reading. I used them last time and I kept, yeah. So, yeah, I'll kill them out, get the comments up. Happy New Year, Luke. Thank you. So I know it's working because somebody's commented. Right. So without further ado, let's crack on. This is Body Electric. Drip, drip, drip. Blood splashed onto the plastic cassette box. Dan wiped his nose with the back of his hand, cursed, then wiped the cassette down his denims. Clicking the tape off and removing the headphones, he slipped the offensive recording back into its box and shuddered. Something about the music, if you could even call it music, made his head feel funny. The relentless drone, punishing metallic beats, and agonized howling seriously affected his equilibrium. His vision had blurred, and his blood fizzed in his veins. He couldn't handle it, but he knew a couple of dudes who could. Okay, that was the prequel. Now here we go. Listen, Ned hissed, eyes wide and dilated as the sound undulated and skipped. Hear it? Steve took a long drag on the tarry black stub of a pungent reefer, burning his bottom lip. Nah, man, he replied, dropping the dog end into an empty beer can. The cinder sizzled, then died, as he shook the dregs from side to side. Damn, Ned grumbled, lifting the needle and replacing it on the desired groove. Now pay attention, man, he instructed his stoned compadre. As he began to wind the turntable backwards, a jumble of sounds made his red eyes burn with feverish excitement. There, you hear it? Steve grinned widely. Yeah, man, he drawled, sounding like an inebriated buffalo. He said, hell sausage. Ned spat warm, super-strength lager over the lurid picture of the devil, cavorting with a lady in leather on the album sleeve. No, you twat, he bellowed beneath chokes and splutters. He said, Hail Satan! Why in the name of the devil's balls would he say hell sausage? Dunno, Steve mused, blinking his bloodshot eyes. Maybe he's talking about the devil's knob or something, man. Ned huffed and rolled his eyes. This isn't getting us anywhere. He put the needle back at the start of the LP and then set it going. Harsh speed metal guitars burst from the tatty cabinet speakers. Ned cracked open another beer and started to headbang enthusiastically. His stringy black hair whipped the glossy magazine posters of naked girls on big motorcycles that adorned his wall with a sharp thwap. Steve grunted in approval and grabbed a can. After a couple of gulps, he joined Ned in a frenzy of air guitar. It often went like this. After reading about the heavy metal band Judas Priest being put on trial in America, they'd become obsessed with backmasking. It was alleged that Judas Priest incited a suicide pact through hiding the phrase, "do it," in one of their songs. Of course, it was thrown out of court after the singer demonstrated that you can decipher any old crap from playing a song backwards. He highlighted this by proving that you could hear the phrase, "I asked her for a peppermint, she said I could have one," in one of their songs. Nevertheless, Ned and Steve were convinced that somewhere amongst their stacks of scratchy metal albums lurked the key to satanic power, a message from the devil himself. In their addled minds, this was their fast track to wealth, fame, and most importantly, chicks. As the 90s dawned, ushering in a sea change in music, they found themselves becoming swiftly unfashionable. Grunge and industrial rock had started to filter in from the States, and it looked to many that metal was dead, but not on Ned and Steve's watch. They saw themselves as crusaders, the last bastion of New Wobham, the Devil's House Band. The second track started in a squeal of fret masturbation. This was one of the slower ones, though that was like saying that Formula 3 was slow compared to Formula 1. It still galloped along at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It was Ned's turn to do rolling duties. He plonked himself down on a beanbag with a copy of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, which contained his spliff paraphernalia. Steve continued to rock out, showering the carpet in sweat and beer. As the track progressed, it inevitably hit the point where they had been trying the backmasking. The heavy high-fidelity cartridge had gouged a deep scratch in the vinyl and skipped harshly when it hit. "Bollocks!" Steve boomed and kicked the desk under the record player. "That's another record knackered, man. We need to find a better way of doing this." He righted the needle, and the song played on. He plopped down on another beanbag opposite Ned. Ned paused in his task for a second. He was currently engrossed in sticking Rizzler papers together to form a large sheet. He intended to produce the stoner's equivalent of origami, the Camberwell carrot. "I'd have thought about that, man. Dan down at Cove Records has this tape for me. It's supposed to be the one, the real deal." "Wow, man," Steve beamed. "What is it?" "Some crazy industrial metal band from Massachusetts. They all disappeared after recording the album. Dan reckons that they live in Lucifer's Palace." "Whoa, hell?" Steve rubbed his wiry ginger beard. "Nah, the casino in Vegas. Imagine the chicks, man. Swimming pools, poker tables, rock and roll, man." "Yeah, bang on, man." Steve raised the devil horn sign and banged his head, then stopped and looked at Ned quizzically. "Tape?" "Yeah." "Well, how are we going to play a tape backwards? It's not like a turntable, man. You can just drag it with your finger." "I know that, you donkey, and I came up with a solution." He carefully picked apart a Marlboro and sprinkled the dried tobacco along the stiff crease he had made in his masterpiece. "We could go down the studio, man. Use the desk. You can run it backwards on that. Awesome! Steve grinned and flashed the horns again. Hey, we could take our gear and have a jam. Ned nodded in quiet resignation. They hadn't played together since their drummer, Lee, the traitor, had cut his hair and got himself a job in accountancy. Steve wanted to find a new drummer and start over. Ned just wanted to get Lee back. It was a common argument that Ned was far too stoned and drunk to have right then. He thought for a second, maybe a good jam session would do him good. I'll get the tape tomorrow and see if Dan has any acid. You talk to Stan at the studio. He still owes me for a sleeve of fags I brought him back from holiday. Tell him if he lets us have it for the night, I'll call it quits. Steve nodded in approval. The track changed again. It was back to warp speed. Steve rose unsteadily and resumed his frantic moshing. Ned finished rolling his monster joint and sparked it into life. A dopey grin spread across his stubbly face as the smoke filled his lungs. Tomorrow was going to be awesome. Steve's day had dragged. The more he had stared at the clock, the slower it seemed to go. Every tawdry household item that he ran through the barcode scanner was met with contempt. Every customer greeted with a surly expression. Soon, when he and Ned managed to contact the devil and cut a deal, the checkout at Quick Save would be a distant memory, a blip on an otherwise glorious existence. And these people, well, they would bow to him. Stan had readily agreed to let them have the studio for the night. It wasn't booked in any case, and it got him off the hook for a $5 that he didn't have. So everyone's a winner. Steve had gone around to Stan's basement flat on his lunch break, then popped to the shop to stock up on ciggies and rolling papers. All that remained was to make it through the final turgid hours of his shift, then use his staff discount on a crate of special brew. Ned's day hadn't made it off the starting blocks. He worked as a window cleaner, and due to the beer sloshing around in his system, he had made it halfway up a ladder, then had to stop and vomit in his bucket. Deciding that it just wasn't going to happen, he slunk back home and hit the mattress for a few sweaty, churning hours. Finally rousing himself mid-afternoon, Ned had headed into town and made a beeline for his own personal mecca, Cove Records. Frantic thrash metal riffs and a dense cloud of cigarette smoke greeted him as he stepped through the shop's hallowed portal. Dan sat behind the desk, wiping an old Sabbath record with an ether-soaked rag. "Hey, man," Ned hollered over the din. "How's it going?" It took Dan a moment to register that it had been addressed. He was something of a casualty. Dan had owned the small but well-stocked shop since the mid-70s and had dropped more acid than Timothy Leary. "Ah," he drawled. "Hey, Ned, what's shaking?" "We got the studio tonight," Ned grinned. "Gonna call on the big guy. You got the tape?" "Tape?" Dan brushed a ratty dreadlock out of his eyes, blinked twice. Then, "Oh, yeah, right here." He held out a cassette for Ned. "That's going to be a collector's item. They're burning all the copies of it over in America." Wow! Ned was impressed. Ritual burnings of albums were akin to a badge of honor in his world. It must be a real deal then. Yeah, people have got mad listening to it and everything. "How much do you want for it, man?" "$5." Dan held out his grubby palm. "Deal." Ned rummaged in the pocket of his patch-adorned denim cut-off jacket. "You got any tabs as well, man?" "Of course." Ned passed him a £10 note. "Hit me up then, man." Once the deal was done and the sheet of blotting paper was tucked into his wallet, Ned left the shop, clinching the tape like it was a holy relic. The artwork was bleak, just a series of interlocking, iridescent spheres on a plain black background. His lips moved as he mouthed the title of the album, All in One and One in All. It gave him a chill. The band's name was similarly full of evil portent. Opener of the way. Ned could feel it in his water. This was the one. The musical key to unlocking the gates of hell. Ned was on his hands and knees when Steve crashed through the studio door with a crate of beer under one arm and his bass guitar slung over his opposite shoulder. Ned, man, what you doing? Ned was in the process of painting a large pentagram on the floor using a large decorator's brush dipped in a viscous red liquid. Steve's eyes widened. Is that blood, man? No, it's Dulux. The butcher had already turned all the pig blood into black puddings. Next to the tub of claret paint was a shopping bag stuffed full with tea lights and a large box of Cook's matches. Candles? Steve asked. Yeah, the hardware shop had run out of anything bigger than tea lights. If we put a bunch of them around the place, it should make his satanic majesty feel at home. Steve shrugged and opened a can. Ned did a crab-like pincer gesture with his right hand. Steve knew what he needed and passed him a beer. After all, painting a 10-foot pentagram is thirsty work. Steve picked up the bag of small candles and started to place them around Ned's art in a perfect circle. Isn't Stan going to be pissed that you painted the floor, man? Steve asked. Nah, Stan's well up for it. He said it would add to the ambience. He gave me the brush. Ned made a final couple of brush strokes. There. Now let's get smashed. The next few hours passed in a blur of booze and marijuana. Ned and Steve rocked out to the tape, blasted through the studio speakers, forwards. Neither man had given much thought to embracing industrial music before, but now, Steve especially, had started to romance the idea of forgoing a drummer altogether in favour of a drum machine, sampler, and Atari ST. As Ned pointed out, you only had to kick a computer once to make it do what you wanted, unlike most drummers. They wouldn't be the last stalwarts of heavy metal to fully embrace emerging technology. Ned was excited about playing for the first time in a very long time. He sat on an amp, battering his Fender Strat copy into oblivion, along with the pulverizing beats and donkey with a sore throat vocals. They had decided to wait until midnight to perform the ritual. At the allotted time of 10:30, they would drop the acid. This meant they would be peaking at just about midnight. Then they would don their instruments, flip the tape, and say a big huzzah to Beelzebub. The satisfying pop and hum of the amplifiers kicking into life sent a warm, fuzzy feeling down Steve's extremities. His battered second-hand Yamaha bass felt powerful in his clammy hands. Ned stood across from him, fiddling with the tone dial on his six-string. After what seemed like forever, the one-note intro, originally the outro, fired into pneumatic beats, and the LCD of Ned's black plastic watch flicked to a line of zeros. What was so genius about the choice of a straight 4/4 beat was that it worked just as well backwards as it did forwards. The samples used by the band had been manipulated in such a way that they sounded like they were meant to be played in this manner. Steve marveled at the talent that went into making a tape that sounded great in both directions. He also wondered where he could get hold of whatever drugs the mysterious band from Kingsport, Massachusetts had obviously been on. The frantic guitars had melted into the background somehow, dulling and leveling into a monotonous rumble. Ned's eyes rolled in an ecstasy as he struck a crunching G chord. Steve's body shook as the brutal strike resonated in his guts. Without thinking, he started to pummel the E string, hammering his fingers on the 3rd and 5th frets. Looking down at his hands, he was amazed to see his fingers move with a fluid rapidity that he had never possessed before. Raising his head, he gazed enraptured at Ned. Ned's eyes blazed as he thrashed at his guitar. The notes chugged and riffed, washing over his skin like heavy rain. The beat was propulsive and relentless, and it urged his fingers faster and faster. Steve watched agog as he tipped his head back and opened his mouth wide, almost bisecting his face. At that moment, the reverse of the guttural vocals kicked in. Where before they'd been an incomprehensible bellow of syllables, now they seemed to make more sense, but in a very strange way. What assaulted Steve's senses was language, but not a language that he recognized. The effect of the reverse punctuated the speech with new apostrophes and hyphens, lending an unearthly aspect to the rhetoric. Sentences were repeated and repeated. It was a mantra, a ritual. The candles flickered as a cold draft sent chills down the back of Steve's neck. Ned's mouth was moving with the chant, slack and drooling. His eyes registered no reality. His mind was drifting beyond. Fear started to prickle at the back of Steve's neck. The pineal gland, once dormant, was becoming wide awake and pulsing. A strangled cry burst from Ned's throat and twined itself around the demonic structure of the music. His arms let go of his instrument and shot out in a cruciform. Steve couldn't believe his senses. The staccato riff he was playing continued to be audible, as though it has now become part of the hellish tape. Steve wanted to stop, but his fingers wouldn't let him. They continued their worm-like dance up and down the neck of his bass. This was going too far. He didn't want to go to hell, not really. It was just fantasy, something they told themselves to get them through every tedious, soul-crushing day. A reason to do drugs and drink beer. He didn't actually want to meet the devil. Dimly at first, a rent in reality started to brutally slash the air in the center of the pentagram. In a rush of fetid air, it split open like an angry wound. Steve shook in terror as small, wispy tendrils gripped the edges of the rift and dragged it wider. With a hiss of steam, the first of a plethora of evilly glowing iridescent bubbles forced itself into our world. Steve cried in alarm, the sharp noise becoming part of the driving cacophony. Candlelight and whatever luminescence the godlike entity produced projected hellish shadows onto the studio walls. They moved like puppet theatre, showing Steve horrors unimaginable. He wanted to shut his eyes, but found himself compelled to watch the world consume itself in fire and madness. Sparks showered from the amplifiers as the music rose in pitch and ferocity. The pile of cables that ran through the wall conduit and into the sound booth started to writhe and squirm. The pointed metal of the jack leads tasted the air, hunting, searching for fresh meat. The globular mass of the thing from outside continued to build in the center of the room. Two cables snaked across the room and with savage accuracy flew and embedded themselves in Ned's upturned wrists. His eyes burned with electricity and fire before melting away to hollow sockets. This savage horror was enough to break Steve's trance. He called for his friend and tried to ditch his guitar, but the bass had other ideas. All four strings snapped and reared back. Agony racked his body as if they dug themselves into his arm, burrowing deeper and deeper. He roared in pain as he undid the strap and launched the instrument across the room and into one of the amps. The strings ripped from his arm, taking skin and flesh with them. Another plume of sparks burst from the equipment. Steve held his arm tight against his chest and turned to Ned. The final strands of Steve's sanity were harshly severed as he watched helplessly as his friend burst into flames. The worst thing about the sight was the expression of terrified rapture on his blistering features. Finally able to move his feet, Steve bolted for the door. An arc of electricity halted his flight. He was trapped with the formless horror that was materializing in the pentagram. In lieu of anything useful to do, he began to throw beer cans at the creature. Unsurprisingly, they did little more than irritate the abomination. And all the while, the music droned on. Steve knew he was dead. He could taste oblivion. In a final act of rebellion, he picked up a microphone stand and charged towards the fuse box. His life was extinguished as he drove the metal into the circuits. Everything popped and tripped as he took the current into his body. Steve's final thought was of the dawning realization that the music had finally stopped, and the rift had sealed in an instant. The unearthly deity had been banished. The following morning, Stan surveyed the wreckage of his recording studio. This was the first time he had been allowed inside since the tragic deaths of Ned and Steve. In the interim, police, fire officials, and skilled electricians had scoured the property to find the cause of the accident. In the end, it was put down to a pair of known drug users freaking out and accidentally electrocuting themselves amid a spate of rock star destruction. They were sure that if there had been a TV in the studio, then we would have gone out of the nearest window. The tragedy was officially put down to bad acid. Taking in the massive pentagram on the floor, Stan mused to himself that he did indeed add to the ambience of the room. Looking on the positive side, the repairs wouldn't cost that much in the grand scheme of things. And let's face it, if the story of a couple of musicians dying in his studio during a strange ritual didn't bring the metalheads flocking to use his facilities, then nothing would. Stepping into the booth, Stan smiled at the undamaged desk. Sitting on the side was an open cassette box. Stan picked it up and ejected the evil tape from the desk. Once the tape was safely back in its case, Stan tapped it against his palm and placed it in his inside pocket of his leather jacket. He smiled. The guys had said it was pretty rare. He could probably flog it for a few quid. The end. Thank you. That was Body Electric from the Black Hare Press anthology Band. Now, there's a whole bunch of influences on that one, which I'll go into in a moment in more detail. Just for now, let me put up the banner. No, there we go. So if you want to get a hold of the main anthology, that's how you do it. It's getbook.app/band. If you want to get the Drabble Companion, which is it's a nice little book, man. Yeah, I think it adds something to the overall package. It's also kind of cool to have like two things like on your shelf. But that's how you get it. That's getbook.app/band Drabbles. Now I'll answer a couple of questions for you in a minute. So get them down in the comments thing. While you're doing that, I'll just tell you a little bit about how that came about. Well, when I saw the sub, that it had to be sort of basically you had to make the story of your thing had to be a real song, right? But I'd already put down a bunch of notes in one of my notebooks about this story, but I'd called it Born to be Wired. I just thought, and it just so happened I was listening to the Sisters, which is kind of a regular thing in my house. You never guess. I'm a bit of a Sisters fan. Sort of Body Electric, and it just worked. It just really worked. Especially, I mean, the main bulk of the story, like with the two guys, Ned and Steve, that was more inspired by a Hale and Pace skit of Jed and Dave. And Jed says to like, oh yeah, I listened to what an Ozzy Osbourne record backwards the other night, and this voice says to me, "Kill yourself. Everybody hates you. Kill yourself." And he goes, and Jed goes, "What was it? Was it a message from the devil, man?" And he goes, "No, it was my mum. She was shouting through the keyhole." So I got that's where the characters come from, and basically that them two characters are based on two people who I grew up with, near and dear to my heart. I mean, I've always been a dodgy goth, right? But I did hang around with these couple of proper metal warriors, you know, like full on, you know, the big spikes out here and like Saxon patches on the back of their denims and all that, man. Oh, like legends, absolute legends. Great to go out on the booze with, tell you. And I remembered about the Judas Priest trial because it's just so funny. I mean, that bit I mentioned, but what you got to remember is Rob Halford has got a Birmingham accent, and he's in this thing in America. He goes, "Right, I'm going to show you that if you listen carefully while I play this backwards, he says, 'I'd like a peppermint.' She says I could have one." And he played it, and the judge sat there, and you can see, because you know they video the trials now, and the judge's face is just hysterical as this voice from the ether indeed asks somebody for a peppermint. It's just brilliant. Yeah, so all these things kind of came together, and as many of you know, a lot of what I do is cosmic horror and Lovecraftian horror. So a lot of it fits into the Cthulhu mythos. Now, at that point, I hadn't done a story about Yog Sothoth. And I thought, ooh. And I thought, like music of Eric Zahn. So I got to thinking. So yeah, the entity, and that's where the band's name comes from. The one in all and all in one. That's Yog Sothoth, the opener of the way, Yog Sothoth. Yeah, it was just one of those stories that just kind of fell into place. I wish all stories wrote themselves as easily as that one. I really do. Some of them banging my head against the wall, just going, ah! But that one just wrote itself perfectly. Right. I will just have a look at some comments now. Okie dokie. Yeah. Hi, Neen. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Isn't it like ridiculous o'clock in the morning over in Australia? I'm pretty sure it's something like it's like 6:30 or something over there now. So cheers. That's commitment. Yeah. Happy New Year, Dougie. Nice one, man. I'll probably see you at some gigs or something when all this goes away. Yeah. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. There's a whole bunch of Happy New Years. Yeah, the rest of the book there. Neen says, brilliant, can't wait to read the rest of the book. Yeah, there is some fantastic stuff on there. There is some fantastic stuff on there. Okay, Dimitri Blackwood says, the disappearing industrial band makes me think of the rumoured fate of Infesta. Ah, yes. The death metal band. Yes, I remember that. Yeah. Yes, I remember that. It was, yeah, the one that he was swiping with the thing. Yeah, that in my head, it was Master Reality. Yeah. Yeah, so do I. I'd like to do that. In fact, I've got an idea for a story at the moment that I'm not written it yet because I haven't had time, but it's for an anthology about that is set in 1986. So I was actually going to use Stan in his earlier days in that. Yeah, and that one's another one that's just writing itself in my head, and it's going to be whereas this one was named after a Sisters of Mercy song, that one I'm going to name after a Sisters of Mercy T-shirt. I had it when I was younger. It said "Rise and Reverberate" on the bottom of it. And I just thought that'd be a great title for a story, "Rise and Reverberate." So yeah, that's something I'm going to be writing soon. Yeah, Happy New Year. Here he is. Happy New Year, man. I notice I've got an angry face here from Linda Moore. Why an angry face? I don't know what I've done. I know Linda, so I'll ask her. Oh, why an angry face? Yeah, cool. Right. If that's pretty much everything from everybody, know that, yeah, excellent. So, like I said before, there we go. There's blackharepress.com. That's who put out the book. If you go on their thing, I've got an author page on there, and there's all the other stuff that I'm in, and Black Hare is on there, including a novella that I've got coming out at the end of February, Miracle Growth, which I tend to have two different types of thing I do. I have the more gothic end of it, which is like my previous novella, Burning Reflection. And then I have Miracle Growth, which is the other end of what I do, which is the more bonkers. I mean, more akin to what I've just read, but even more so. I mean, I love that one. It's one of my favorite bits of my own work, because it was basically what I thought as what would happen if H.P. Lovecraft wrote Day of the Triffids, then got Simon Pegg and Nick Frost to turn it into a film. So yeah, it's basically Day of the Triffids meets Color Out of Space meets Hot Fuzz. Yeah, I'm so happy about it getting released because yeah, I mean, it got accepted a long time ago, so I'm looking forward to reading it again. Actually, yeah, so that's all on the Black Hare Press thing. Again, if you want to get the Drabble thing, it's getbook.at band Drabbles, and you've got getbook.at band for the main shiny. Yep, that is my YouTube channel. That's tinyurl.com/Tim Mendees YouTube. Chances are you're already watching it on that because this will be uploaded to that in the morning. So if you're watching it on that and not Facebook, that's my Facebook. It's facebook.com/Goat in the Machine. And this is my website where, yeah, just go on that. I'll keep people up to date, to be honest. It's one of the best ways of finding everything because there's different tabs with stuff on them. You know, look at me. How tech savvy I am. Bunch of tabs with stuff on them. Okay, yeah, timmendeeswriter.wordpress.com. Okay, yes, so I'll just have one last check. So yeah, thank you everybody again, and thank you for joining me on New Year's Day. I know most of you have probably got hangovers. Yeah, excellent. Here's to another year of live readings and stuff. Just yeah, let's hope that all the goes away. Okay, thanks guys. Yeah, take care, and I will see you shortly, some point soon.